Welcome to today's Flexi webinar. Today, Aaron Clapp will be our presenter. Most of you probably are familiar with him. He is the Director of Training here at SAI and knows everything there is to know about Flexi. Today, he's going to be talking about how to use the color profile analyzer in Flexi. And so he'll have his presentation on that for about 20 minutes or so. And then we will open it up for questions. If you have any during the presentation or after, just go ahead and type them into the chat window on the right there, and we will try and answer as many of those as we can. And it can either be about the color profile analyzer or any other questions you have about Flexi. So if you've been wondering anything, feel free to type it in there. And I think that's, we will be recording today's webinar as usual. So we will upload it to our YouTube channel after we are done, and we'll send everyone a link. So if you need to leave early or you'd like to share this with someone else or review it later, we will be recording it and we will send you a link to the recording. And with that, we'll turn it over to Aaron.
All right. So the color profile analyzer. We're going to do a little bit of explanation here and a few things here, kind of a little bit of history, or not history, but maybe a little bit of gathering of some info here before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what this actually is and how we use this tool. So the first thing is this is a tool that is that helps users find out what's happening with their profile, and it'll give us a very visual indication or an examples of what our profile is doing, what colors it can hit, what colors it cannot hit, in the color spectrum that this profile is built for. So first of all, though, we want to kind of emphasize the importance of color profiling. Now, obviously, if you have a color printer, you're going to be using an ICC profile. And one of the things that we do is we often provide profiles for many of the different machines, makes, and models for printers out there. Now, these machines or these profiles were made on these machines, and for the most part, they're pretty reliable. Now, the thing that sometimes I get often asked in a support role is people ask me, well, why should I even bother, getting into profiling if all these profiles are available for me? Well, one of the things that we like to tell people is if you want to get the best color, the color that's better than any shop around, creating your own custom profiles is the best way to outdo anybody. That's kind of just a rule of thumb. And yes, I will say that there is some investment that needs to happen in terms of buying us color spectrophotometer and some time in terms of learning how to create a profile and things like that. And we've talked a lot in these webinars and also on our YouTube channel about how to create profiles, why that's necessary, how to get the best color profile. In fact, just as a kind of a shameless plug, if you go to, let me pull up our web browser here, and let me grab our YouTube channel. So here's our YouTube channel, and you've got our webinars playlist. But in the Workflow Wednesday, this is actually our live show that we do. There's actually a couple really key ones that we've done in here. So we did how to get the best color from your printer, part 1, 2, and 3. We've also done some things on how to create a printer profile. So there's a ton of resources that we've gotten you guys so that you guys can get more information about that. So I would highly check those out. If you've not delved into the world of color profiling yet and gotten into that, it's a really good worth look at. And I would seriously consider getting into it, mainly just because the differences that you can see from just a standard stock profile that we've provided versus a custom profile built for your machine. And honestly, it's really not too hard to do. It's pretty easy with Flexi. The things will amaze you, how well you can get this color, how accurate it can be, and how much more simple your life could be with a profile that actually works perfect on your machine. So what else do we want to talk about kind of when it comes to this? Well, one of the things we're going to be talking about is rendering intents. And there's a big something we need to know about rendering intents when we look at the profile and the color profile analyzer. It's important for us to know some things. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to draw something on screen and pull up my rip and print so that I can show you guys where the rendering intents are. Some of you may or may not have seen the rendering intents before. So if we go to our color here, and I'm just going to say use color correction, and then hit color settings. So I'm in my color settings tab. I make sure that I have use color correction, and I click on color settings. If I go into rendering intent, this is where my rendering intent settings are. So I've got a whole list of things here. So I've got perceptual, relative color metric, absolute, saturation, black point. I've got all these different options. And so, some of this can be really confusing, and you may say, well, which one do I choose? Well, this is a good question. And this is kind of going to, when we get into the color profile analyzer, we're going to kind of see, where this comes into. But this is a interpretive process. So you have your profile, and it has a color range that it can achieve. And then what these do is this is a method in which the profile gets interpreted as it goes out to your printer. And it's going to be printed by your CMYK device or whatever device that you have. And these settings are kind of key to some color. It will make a difference in the way that your color prints. So for example, typically, and I have it set to relative color metric right now, but typically bitmaps, we usually set to perceptual. And this is mainly because of how we perceive light and how our eyes see color and the naturalness of the image. So I actually pulled up our knowledge base here, and I looked up rendering intents, and we'll look at the main ones. We're going to look at perceptual, relative color metric, and absolute color metric. And we're going to kind of just look at those and kind of define those before we move on to the tool. So let's take a look here real quick, and we'll go back to our thing here. So I just went in here and I searched rendering intents, and I was able to pull up this page here. And right here, we have definitions of some of how these make a difference. So when we're looking at perceptual, why would we use perceptual over something else? Well, this intent, like it says here, is really geared toward photographs. Any color that lands outside of the color gamut of the profile that you're using is compressed into the color gamut of the profile. What this means is that all of the colors in the bitmap are going to shift just slightly. So imagine, I'm trying to think of a good illustration of what to kind of illustrate this is, but if you have colors that are inside of the color gamut, those colors will shift just a little bit too. So as the colors get smashed into the profile gamut, those other colors are going to shift. And the reason why they shift is to create a balance or a visual effect that gives us differences in colors that our eyes recognize and want to see. And so you don't want colors just clipped off in a bitmap, because you'll kind of really notice that. And so when you shift the colors this way with perceptual, it gives our eyes the idea that we're printing a lot more than we actually are, and the color shift. And again, the shift may not be very big, but it changes just slightly so that there are enough differences in color that you get a kind of a wide range image. Typically, we wouldn't want to use this when we're doing vector images because of how much the vector objects because it's going to change the color probably too much for what we want. This is where relative color metric and absolute color metric come in. So relative color metric is best for types of things like it mentions here, logos, business cards, different things you're going to be printing that the color needs to stay consistent. Now, the difference between relative color metric and absolute color metric is basically the white point. So absolute color metric always takes a fixed white point of D50 and then adjusts its colors based on there. Whereas relative color metric, the white point is always 0. So what does this mean though in terms of what happens when we try and print an image that's out of color or outside of the profile's ability? What happens with the color? Well, with relative color metric and absolute color metric, those colors tend to get clipped off or basically just not printed. They will, so if you have a color that is just outside the gamut, it will print that color as its closest representation as it can. And we'll kind of see that here in a visual way. I'll kind of show you in a visual method here what that kind of means. But basically what it's saying is that that color will not be able to be printed. And so it's being cut back into the edge of the color profile. So we'll take a look at that. So depending on what you're doing, you may want to choose perceptual. If you're doing bitmaps, things like that. If you're doing vector artwork that requires you to hit certain colors, you're going to probably choose relative color metric or absolute, most likely relative color metric. And then there's some other ones here. For example, saturation. This one is if you really don't care necessarily about color accuracy, but you're more looking for vibrant, vivid colors. That's kind of what the saturation is for. And so it's a little bit different intent. So having said all that, we kind of went beat around the bush a little bit, but I think it's important to kind of know some of these things before we jump into it. Otherwise, it might seem a little confusing as to what we're talking about. So let's jump into the production manager. Where do we find this tool? Well, it is under the edit menu, under the setup menu, and it is the color profile analyzer right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and select a profile. That's the first thing it prompts me to do is I need to open a profile. So I just have some profiles here for a Muto, and we'll just pull them in. It's going to open up over here, and we'll go full screen on this. All right, so this is this color profile, and all these dots are representing the color that this can represent. I don't particularly like this view necessarily. I like to go over here where it says ICC profiles. This is actually the measurements 3D view. I'm going to go to ICC profiles and click on 3D. And this is a little bit smoother, kind of a nicer graph to look at. So this is your profile's color gamut right here. So these are all the colors that this particular profile can hit. And so this is kind of interesting. What's the main use or one of the really obvious uses for this is if you create your own color profile, and then the idea would be to come in here and look at the profile and verify to make sure that this looks good. Now, down here, you can kind of see that it's a little bit scrunchy and kind of not smooth down here. So with this particular profile, it obviously has issues in the darker areas. So the dark purples, blues, and dark greens and things like that down in this area. It's not terrible, but you can kind of see how it's jagged and kind of bumpy, whereas the rest of it has a nice smooth arc to it. Again, this profile is not bad, I would say, and it probably, depending on what you're using it for, will probably perform really well. But it gives you a visual indication. Now, this is kind of something I was doing several months ago. I was making a profile for a machine. I had gone through the entire profile process, and I was wondering, something just didn't look right when I was sending stuff to print. I was sending some test files, and there just seemed to be something weird going on. I brought it in here to Color Profiler, or the Color Profile Analyzer, and I had realized that when I had scanned one of my swatches, I had actually scanned the wrong line. I'd actually duplicated the same line twice. And so that was a mistake that I had made. And when I opened up this view, there was actually like a huge divot right inside of this. And that was a clear indication to me that something was definitely wrong with the profile that I had made. I had made a profile, scanned one of the wrong swatches, and it had caused the profile to get skewed way off. And so my blues were printing greens, and it was doing some weird things. So I was easily able to look at this and say, oh, okay, there's something wrong with my greens and blues here. I was able to go back to my profile, go through some of the swatches and say, okay, this is where I messed up. I accidentally scanned the same rows twice. I went in, I rescanned them, saved the profile again, and then I was able to fix it. So if you're making profiles, this is a really good way to kind of look at your profile and see if there's anything weird going on. You know, something drastic or something that's way out of look or out of whack. You don't want to see big divots in here. You don't want to see spikes coming out of it. That's not, you kind of want to see a shape that's somewhat uniform, something like this, or very, very similar. Now, here's something that we can also use this for. So if you're creating a profile and you say, okay, these are the kind of colors that I want to hit, you know, how do I know if I've hit these colors, or I can hit these colors? Even if you don't, if you haven't created a profile, you can theoretically, you could, just like I did here, I can just go in and open the profiles that I have inside of my setup, and I can analyze them and see if the profile can actually hit the colors that I'm trying to hit. So I'm going to load a file here, and this is just going to be on my desktop. And this is a test image, and so just so you know what this looks like, see if my Windows will open it here. Okay, so this is, you've probably seen these types of graphics before. They have all kinds of colors, they have flesh tones, they have bright colors, they've got RGB stuff, they have like a color wheel. This is the image that I just loaded. So just so you know what it looks like, this is the image that we loaded, and it's a really good image to test your printer after you've created a profile, because it's got a lot of stuff in it, especially these gradients and all kinds of other things, and colors that pop, true blacks and things like that. So I've loaded this in here, and you can see that the dots indicate all the colors that are represented in this file, and you can also see where they are inside of Gamut and where they're not. So I've got a huge amount of colors that are right here, but then you can see that this particular profile, for whatever reason, it really starts struggling in the dark areas. So you can see like this whole row of red and dark blues and greens. This is kind of the area where it's struggling the most. Now there are some colors way out here that are very, very bright greens and bright yellows, very, very bright blues that it's not able to hit. So we can kind of visually see what's going on here in terms of this file and how this would print. So we can see that now this is a kind of a worst case scenario, right? This is a file that has such a vast array of stuff in it. It's got CMYK bitmaps, it has RGB bitmaps, it's got lab colors, spot colors, CMYK colors. So this is kind of like a gauntlet for this profile to hit, but it's a good indication. So here's another thing we can do. Let's pull in a different file from our C drive. Let's see here. And we're just going to go down here to our samples folder. And we'll just pull in a bit like this, for example, or the dolls. Let's pull this in. So we can see again here, this is a profile that was A lot of our colors are hitting in here, but again, we're struggling with the reds and kind of the darker blues here. So when we talk about, let's go back to the color metric. We can kind of see, based on our rendering intent, what colors we can hit. So now notice how when we change the rendering intent to perceptual, how we can now hit some of those colors. We can hit those colors now because of the way that the profile is being processed and what kind of intent it's using. And so we can kind of see that, and that makes a big difference in how much it can reach. Now, again, if you're looking for color accuracy, though, if you're trying to hit a specific spot color, you wouldn't want to use perceptual because it's going to try and compress, and it's not going to reach that exact color. So in this particular case, if we're trying to hit that, we would say, well, this profile is probably not capable of it. We would need to either get a new profile or tweak our profile and find out what's wrong with it as to why it can't hit that color. I can come in here and I can turn this on and off if I want to, simply like that. Let's take a look at the 2D. Here's just the same representation, except for here's in a 2D fashion. And then here's our luminosity. So brighter colors and then darker colors here. So you can see on the darker color spectrum, that little triangle kind of goes away. And then here's all the colors that we really can't hit. So let's leave this back at 50. And let's look at the difference between relative color metric and the other. So if we look at this right here, you see these little dots that are kind of way here. They might be hard to see. I don't know if I can't really zoom in, but for example, this dot right here, this color, when I'm choosing relative color metric as my rendering intent, this color will be moved to the edge of the gamut. So what this means is all of these colors inside of the gamut are not going to move. They will print as they are on screen. But these colors that are out here are all going to shift right to the edge of the gamut. So whatever the maximum color that this profile can print, it's going to shift all of these colors right to the edge of the gamut. So basically we get what we call clipping. So it's going to clip most of them off, and you're going to get kind of like an even color. So if you have like all these kinds of shades of deep red, what's going to happen is all those shades are going to kind of they're going to look like they're all the same color is what's going to happen, because it's going to move them right in here. Now, if we go to perceptual, what perceptual does is that when it moves these dots out here into the color space, it's going to also shift all of the dots in here. So they're all going to get kind of pushed closer to the white point or the center here. And so you're going to get a little bit of a change, but at least you're going to see the natural progression of the colors. So yes, these colors are going to change and they won't stay necessarily consistent to the image, but when you look at the image, you're going to see those color shifts very distinctly, because all this is going to get compressed into the color gamut. So this is kind of what we're talking about when it terms of rendering intent. Now let's take a quick view at some of these other options here. We've got the curves option, and what this does is this shows us the curves, our linearization curves of our and I actually like to go to the measurements section and look at the curves instead of the ICC profiles, because this is the actual measured data from the profile. And so if I look at curves and I look at cyan, I can see I've got a pretty smooth curve on my cyan. This is looking good. I can go down to my magenta. Same thing. I've got a little bit of a nice curve here. We're looking for nice smooth movements. Here we've got a little bit of something going on with the yellow. Up here at the high end and the low end, we've got a little bit of jaggedness going on here. We would want to try and see if we could figure what's going on there. And then we got a little bit of a jump right here. So typically you want to see pretty much a smooth arc. And in this case, we got a little bit of a jaggedness going on. Could that be the result of some of the issues we have with some of our colors? Possibly, but it's not terrible, but it's not the best either. Let's go to our black. And again, our black looks pretty decent. As we get up here towards the top, we get a little bit of wavery, but it's not, that's not terrible. We're getting towards 100%. And so this is going to be kind of a hard one to hit anyway. So this is okay. Again, you'd like to see a nice smooth transition all the way across to kind of see that. So this is your color profile analyzer. It's really kind of meant to give you a snapshot of your profile and see what's going on with it. One other thing that we can do is, let's see here, is we can, in one of these options here, I can, okay, so I can pull in a reference profile. So here's an option. So if I go into the spiderweb option and I choose reference profile, what this does for me is I can actually pull in a different profile. So I'm going to go over here to this 720 by 1440 profile and hit open. And now I can kind of look at some of the stuff next to each other. So let's go back up to my 3D drawing here. So I can see now, let's take the sample data out. So I can see and I can kind of compare the two different profiles and where each one is a little bit different. So I can see that down here and in some of our lighter colors, this profile is a little bit different. In fact, it looks like it can hit a lot more lighter colors all around, and it looks like it can hit some deeper reds as well. So this profile seems like it's a little more well balanced. It's a little bit different. So I can compare a couple different profiles and say, oh, okay, this profile, this versus this profile, I see where the differences are and why I'm hitting this color with this profile but not this one. So I can go back and forth with these, and then I can use this spiderweb graphic, which it can be a little bit difficult to read. In the color industry, this is kind of one of those graphs that is pretty popular. I have a hard time reading it, but we can kind of see the curves, and then we can also reference that with our profile, and you can kind of see the color differences and where the reach is and things like that for this other profile as well. So this is the color profile analyzer. Again, you can take an image, any image, as long as it's a TIFF or a JPEG, I think it's what that's limit is, TIFF, JPEG, other files. I want to say that TIFF and JPEG are the main ones that you're going to use here. This will allow you to compare the file that you're trying to print and see if it's even reachable. Then, if you do get involved in color profiles and doing any of that, this is a really good tool for you to kind of analyze your profile, see where your profile is at, and kind of determine, oh, do I have any problems? Does my color gamut look good? Is there jagged spots? Is there spots where it's glaringly missing? So it's kind of a tool that you can use to kind of help make your profiles a little bit better. So with all that said, hopefully this will kind of make sense of what this tool is all about, what it's kind of used for, what its intent is for, and hopefully you can use this. And what I would do is I would really honestly encourage everybody who's here and everybody who listens to this webinar to get involved in making the profile. You don't have to go out and buy the most expensive device out there to get working on a profile. You can get the low-end i1 devices, or if you even find a used i1 device, we support a large amount of the i1 devices or some of the other Barbieri devices, the more expensive ones. But you would be amazed if you can get into that color process and creating your own color profiles, you'll be amazed the things that you can do when it comes to your color and how much easier it can make your life in terms of getting that custom color for your machine. Unfortunately, when you buy, if I were to buy a Muto 1628, and then one of you guys went out and bought the same printer, yes, technically we provide profiles that should work for that device. But unfortunately, just because of the way that the manufacturing process works and the differences between the machines, no two machines are exactly the same. So I could use the same material on these two different devices, and they might actually print out differently. It's maybe slight. It might be bigger difference. There might be no difference. It kind of just depends on the machine. But the custom color, the most accurate color is going to get when you calibrate your device and your software to your machine that way. Are there any questions or anything about this, or about maybe color profiling in general, or about just in Flexi?
Okay, looks like we do have a few color questions. Colin said, when printing the same job with the same profile, 2 different times I get 2 different colors. Why is that on the same printer?
Let's see. Well, that's an interesting thing that could be happening. One of the things that there's a lot of things that could be happening there. If it's the same file, same everything, I would, if nothing has changed in the software, then I would wonder if there's something going on with the machine in terms of, is it having some kind of problem? Here's something I like to tell people to do, is go in and print those the head tests and verify that all the lines are there. It's going to print these teeny little lines when it does the nozzle check. It's going to print these super skinny little lines, and basically what that does is it's using different nozzles in the head to fire and create those lines. If any of those lines are missing or half printed, it means you have an issue with the head somewhere. It needs to be cleaned. And honestly, if you have any of those missing, that could throw off your print. You're not supposed to have, because if the machine is expecting it to fire out of that head and it doesn't, that could be a major issue. Now, if one of the things I would maybe suggest is if it's something where you're struggling with maybe consistency, I don't know if you've done this or not yet, but one of the things that you could do is we could do what we call a preset. So what you do is you come into your production manager here, and you select your printer. You go to default job properties, and you would go ahead and set up everything the way that you want it to be. So the profile, everything. You come in here and you set all this up. You save it as a preset, and then it'll show up here. So let me just say that I say save as. I hit OK. Test 1. At this point, I can hit OK. And then if I go back to my Flexi, now that test 1 is here. When I click test 1, it's going to automatically pull in every single setting that I used all over again for me. So my profile, my color settings, my print mode, my color mode, all this stuff is going to be the same. So this kind of makes it easier to be consistent. So try that if that doesn't work. But if everything is exactly the same, one of the here's a test that you can do. You can send a file, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I can say hold and list and hit send. If you take the same file and you go into Production Manager just like this, and you rip the file, right? So we're ripped, we're all done. If you take this file, it's already ripped, it's already ready to go. If you take this file, you print it once and it comes out one color, and then you grab the same file after you've printed it again and hit send again, and then reprint it and it changes color. At that point, this file has already been ripped. Once it's been ripped, if you send it again, it does not get re-ripped. So that means that the data that's contained inside the file that it sends to the printer is exactly the same. So if it does change color, then you know for sure that's a surefire way of telling, okay, there's something wrong with the printer somewhere, something's going on, because Flexi's sending it the exact same data from the production manager, and it's getting two different results. That's, what do I do, there? And at that point, you look at the printer and kind of see that. So that's a test you could try and see if that helps.
Lots of different options there. We have some more here. Philip said, are you going to offer this in more simple version? With the color profile analyzer.
You mean for well, no, I would say this is, I don't think so. This was introduced in 19. Again, it's something that you kind of have to get the hang of profiles to kind of see, but essentially what we're looking for here is in this tool analyzer. One of the things that there's some advanced features here that I would probably even struggle to use, that would probably be more geared towards those who are making profiles professionally. But the things that I like about it in terms of looking at something in terms of the profile that I've created is I like to use this as a verification tool for what I've done. So when I create a profile, I pull it in, I look at it. Does this look even? Does it look kind of correct? If it does, then I can probably proceed and try a test print. If I see a massive spike in here, or half of my color gamut is chopped off, then I can visually just see that I've got a major problem. This is kind of a big issue, and I can say, all right, well, somewhere I've messed up, because I should have all my greens here. I've got my whole green section is cut off. Or I've got this wild spike that just kind of juts out of the middle of it. That's not right. Or I've got a big divot inside of it. That's not right either. This should look something like this, very similar to this in most cases. So this is kind of what I use it for. And then I like to come in here and I like to look at my curves. So I like to look at the curves and see where these are. You can also look at these curves when you create the profile, but it's always kind of a nice double check to kind of look at everything and kind of see where everything is at, just to verify my work, to make sure that I'm doing everything correctly. Because if I see anything way out of ordinary here, that kind of gives me an indication that something's not right. I probably need to double check the profile. Maybe I scanned something wrong. Maybe the color didn't read right, or something's wrong. Maybe I need to rescan my swatches or something like that.
Okay. Then the next question we have, let's see. Lindsay said, when I am printing to a Canon Pro 100, colors are skewed. Red is orange, blues are more green.
Okay, so what I would do again in that case is one of the things that you can do, and we actually tell customers that are struggling with grays to kind of do the same test. What ends up happening is if you want to verify to see if it's maybe the profile, just select a random profile or grab a different profile and just print with it and see if you get any differences in the color. If you try a couple different profiles and you find one that maybe doesn't even match your material at all, but it seems to be printing better in terms of certain colors, then you can almost certainly tell that it's a profile issue. You would be amazed how many times or how often something as simple as reds printing orange, or different things like that, blues printing greens, grays miscolored, how many times that is actually an issue with the profile. it's probably more often than not that, and this is even applies to these machines like the Epson, some of the newer Epson printers that have like the Epson dashboard where you download profiles from Epson, or even newer HPs. This can happen to them too, because they have profiles that they download right from HP. Those profiles sometimes don't work that great. And there's many times when we talk to customers, we say, well, just try a different profile and see. Even though it doesn't match your media, try something else. Does the problem with the grays go away? Sometimes their answer is yes, and say, okay, well then we know that that profile is not performing well in certain areas based on your printer. And so it needs to be recalibrated or redone. And so that's something that is really important because, like I said, every machine is different. You could have 15 of the exact same model, make and model, and they would all probably print slightly different if we tried to the same profile and the same settings on each one. And so this is where color profiling really can iron out some of those irregularities and give you some of the best color on your machine. It will expand the radius of colors that you can hit.
Okay, we've got a long question here from Bob. He said, when adding, or from Dustin, sorry, we'll do that one first. It says, I've made my own profiles for years. However, I'm curious why color correction seems to turn a simple color like a 0, 25, 100, 0 yellow to a sort of washed out, unsaturated color, and even includes small black dots that give a final output that appears to have a lot of noise or very visible ink drops. If I in turn change the render intent to no color correction, it produces a rich, smooth color with no super visible noise or ink drops. At the same time, the no color correction is selected in the rendering intent. It still seems to use the data from the profile, even though no color correction is selected, like ink limits, multi-ink limits, etc. The same goes for many other simple vector colors like reds, blues, greens, etc. Using relative color metric seems to desaturate them and output an unsmooth final print. Ink drops, small amount of black, etc. Essentially, it seems that color correction sometimes works against me in terms of the look of the final output of vector graphics.
So what I would probably say to that is no color correction. If you set it to no color correction, it really doesn't use color correction. It basically just allows your machine to kind of dump as much ink down as possible. Now, there are other printers that can handle that better than others. So for example, any of the Pantone printers, like the ones that do a lot of the processing on the printer side, like there's some of the Canon machines and the HP latex machines, they kind of control the ink a little bit. And so they're not going to let the ink just pool out as much as possible. So there are some machines that kind of do handle that a little bit better than others do, the no color correction thing. But then there's others where it'll just start dumping ink everywhere, so that by the time it comes out, ink is just running off the edge of the print. So it kind of just depends on the machine and whatnot. But basically, no color correction just means that it's going to let the printer do whatever it wants. Again, I would wonder, I would like to see, this is kind of a difficult kind of question to kind of answer, but usually, sometimes what can happen is, for example, when we are printing, say, something like 100% yellow, we're just using all the yellow ink. Depending on the profile could inject some colors when it's not supposed to. So that is why we have the options for, so we go into our color settings, rendering intent, and we can set pure hue values. What this does is, if I say pure hue for yellow, what that will do is it says, okay, for the yellow, don't use the color profile to process any of it. So what this does, it now turns off the profile for yellow only. So if I'm printing, any pure color of yellow, it will eliminate some of that spotting that can happen where it inserts little specks of black or cyan or other colors. And that's what the pure hue is for. And it can help that. I've seen it help with a lot of different instances. So maybe that might help in some cases. There's a lot of things that we could address there. We'd have to maybe want to just see and kind of play around with a little bit. Maybe we'd see more specific examples and maybe look at profiles and stuff. But just kind of off the top of my head, that's kind of those are my thoughts.
Okay. Looks like we're almost out of time, but we have a few more questions. Randy wanted to know if you can edit the point in the linearization curve.
You can't. Not in there, no. That's part of the profile. And if we change anything in the profile, what ends up happening is that it kind of changes everything. So if I change the linearization just a little bit, that curve is going to throw off all my colors down the road. So that's why you're not able to change it there. You would have to adjust your ink limits. That's kind of where it's at, is you would change your ink limits and when you're creating the profile, and that's what's going to adjust that linearization curve.
Okay.
Now, there are all kinds of other factors involved with that, like heat, drying temperatures, all that kind of stuff can determine how much or how little ink you can use on a material. So that that there's a lot of different factors there as well.
All right, let's see here. So we're just about out of time. We'll need to wrap it up in another couple minutes here. But we had some more questions. Bob asked, sorry, it keeps scrolling down. When adding a Pantone color table, which one do you recommend?
Well, it kind of depends on what you want to do. If I right click and go to open table, there is Pantone. I think the default standard ones are typically the solid coated and the solid. So this one here, solid coated, and the solid coated V3 is the new ones. So these are kind of the standard ones. So solid coated and solid uncoated are the two big ones that have the majority of the colors. And then these are updates to them. So the V3 is the newest ones. And then, of course, you got some UV and different ones that are split apart here. But those are the two ones that I would typically use. In fact, uncoated is probably not used as much. So solid coated V3 and solid coated, those are the two ones that that most of your Pantone colors are going to be in.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's just about all the time we have for today. Aaron, if they are looking for any more resources into color profiling, do we have any other videos, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so that website, go to our YouTube channel. There is a ton of stuff that we've done on color. So if you go to the SAI channel again and you pull up our page, we have got playlists for this kind of thing. So if you look at our Workflow Wednesday, this is the live streams that we were doing this last year. There's a ton of color stuff, and specifically there's even one for how to create a color profile down here somewhere. So here it is.
So you walk them through the whole process.
Yep, and in this video, it's an hour-long video, so it's a little bit longer, but we walk through step-by-step on the process of how to create an ICC profile and what you're looking for and things like that. So awesome. There's all kinds of resources available on our YouTube channel. I would check it out. You'll find something there, I think.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Aaron, so much for going over all of that. Everyone, we do appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn more about Flexi with us. And we were recording the webinar, so we will send everyone an email with a link to that recording. And our next webinar, last one for the year, is going to be on December 8th. And we will be talking about how to use the Find My Font tool. So we hope to see you all next month, and have a great day.